Okay, welcome to the Arborist Call, the 7th of September. Arborist Calls are a means for the Zcash community to come together and discuss the Zcash protocol. We're going to start off with updates from the two main teams from ECC regarding Zcashd and associated software, including the SDK. And then from the Zcash Foundation to talk about Zebra. We'll then hear from any team members present who can provide updates on research and implementation status. Then open it up for open announcements. And then I've added a discussion topic to today's agenda, which is something that came up, we discussed a little bit last time around, which is detection keys. And I think that alongside that, we should talk about out-of-band notes and liberated payments. And then we'll finish off with some open discussion and wrap it all up. So these calls happen bi-weekly. They are a mechanism or a venue for people who contribute to the Zcash protocol to come together to discuss the work they're doing, timelines and processes, the progress of research and development efforts. And the most important thing is to identify blockers and to make sure that we don't have mutual blocking going on. The purpose is to make discussion of Zcash core protocol development more accessible to a wider set of participants and to provide transparency for the broader Zcash community. Anybody can join these calls. All you have to do is register as an attendee, which you can do so by pointing your browser at zcasharborist.org. And if you want to present something or if you want to raise a discussion topic, then you can do so by dropping an email to arboristcall@zfnd.org. Other ways to get involved in Zcash are to apply for a major grant by going to zcashcommunitygrants.org and learning more about the Zcash Community Grants Program. We also currently have the second round of Zcash Minor Grants open. That's a separate program that's run by the Zcash Foundation, and you can learn more about that by going to the Zcash Foundation's website. A good place to get involved in discussion about the technical aspects of Zcash is the R&D Discord. And finally, there's the Zcash Community Forum, which is always lively and spicy with lots of exciting discussions from across the Zcash ecosystem. And I appreciate that you can't click on any of these links, but you can find them by pointing your browser at zcasharborist.org. Arborist calls have changed. If you're watching this live, then you know that the late slot has changed from 22:30 UTC to 9 p.m. UTC. The earlier slot is staying at 3 p.m. UTC. And again, you can find the new registration links by pointing your browser at zcasharborist.org. Let's get started with ECC. And I'm guessing that Chris is in the hot seat today.
Yep. So the main announcement from ECC is that we are rapidly converging on the release candidate for the next version of the mobile SDKs. So both the Android and iOS mobile SDKs, all of the changes to the Zcash core libraries and Zcash client backend and Zcash client SQLite are complete at this point. And I think at this point we are just in some final testing, and we should expect a release candidate tomorrow for the mobile SDKs. So that's been the primary focus, is just all of the work to get a nonlinear sync out of order and sync and the ability to spend funds before your wallet is fully synced into the mobile SDKs. So that's everything that we've been doing.
Congratulations, being focused on one thing and getting it done is absolutely great. And congratulations on being so close to having those released. Any questions or comments on that topic? Okay, let's move on and let's hear from Zcash Foundation about Zebra. And I genuinely don't know who's in the hot seat today for this one.
Oh, if you can hear me, I can do it.
Okay, go ahead, Marek.
Okay. So last week on Friday, we released Zebra 1.2, and that contains the deduplication that I mentioned 2 weeks ago. And I realized I forgot to mention back then that we were shipping that change with an internal framework for database upgrades in Zebra, and that means that users don't have to resync the whole node from scratch and rebuild the database if there's a database upgrade, but Zebra will do it on its own without any user interaction. And we're using this framework to add the subtree roots for the new RPC method, z get subtrees by index, and that's also implemented. We're testing it, and it'll go into the next release. And that's all the main updates, basically.
Okay, any questions relating to Zebra? Sure.
Probably something that's worth mentioning is the upgrade we're doing at the moment is incompatible with previous Zebra versions in some fairly subtle ways. So yeah, once you've upgraded to Zebra version 1.2 and don't then go and use earlier versions with the same state, because it might panic or give the wrong results in a particular RPC. You can see the details of that in the changelog.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? If not, let's move on to research and implementation updates. And Deirdre, I'm guessing that as you've unmuted yourself, you're on point for Frost.
Quick Frost update. Can you hear?
Yep, we can hear you.
Good, great. We are finalizing a couple of items. Frost implementation audit, mostly small things, but also we've been recently to improve documentation about mostly the Frost libraries in general and how to use them, but also we're merging about how to use our Frost libraries for Zcash specifically and how it intersects with the general shielded Zcash signing process and the key tree and things like that. In the fixes that pertain specifically to the audit, we'll be doing a little, so that will affect the public shape of the API. This is a lead. We are still in the beta versions of our crates. So this will be 0.star releases, continuing with what we're doing, but this will lead up to a 1.0 stable release in the future, where we hopefully will not be rearranging the public API in that point. What else? Yes, so we'll be merging those Zcash specific docs to our Zebra book soon, and we are preparing for our Frost and Wallet Dev community call. We were hoping to have a bit of a more conversation with wallet devs at VCon, but we didn't quite make it. It didn't quite happen. So we're hoping to have a little bit more conversation, help wallet developers integrate and support signing for Zcash transactions into their wallets. So we're working towards the next few weeks. That is mostly what we've got for Frost right now.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the other participants in the call on Frost?
And all those updates will get pushed to our crates.io releases soon.
Cool. Okay, does anybody else want to provide any updates on research or implementation work that's going on? Nate, go for it.
Yes. Hey, I I just posted an update to the forum about proof of stake research. So it describes how I gave a presentation at ZCon. It was a workshop. The content is like somewhat underdeveloped for a design, so it was sort of a presentation providing like the gist of the approach. And there's a lot of good feedback from the audience about concerns or issues. So since then, we have been looking into kind of this primary concern, and we're still trying to figure out how to specify it more precisely. But the English language version is in the design, there's two sub protocols. There's proof of work and there's proof of stake. And often with security, security is limited by the weakest link in the system. So the question is that the case here? If we have this kind of design, can an attacker sort of like compromise either component? And if they do, you know, achieve some attack, and if that's the case, is that easier for them or less costly than if the protocol were just pure proof of work or pure proof of stake? So that's what we've been focused on, and we've been doing some road mapping just this week. So we sort of have two milestone goals. And the first one is to kind of address this security issue by specifying the problem well and seeing what we can understand once we have that specified. And then also making sure we're kind of writing down a design for trolling finality layer that maps to the ebb and flow paper precisely, so that we know that the results in that paper would hold for our design. And that sort of first pass at the design will exclude a lot of the actual staking details and mechanics, such as, you know, what is the issuance rate, or how do users create staking bonds or delegate. All of that complexity won't be in that, so it'll primarily just talk about proof of stake as kind of a black box connected to proof of work, and then we're analyzing the security from that higher level. And then the second milestone is we want to get started on writing code that we are refining as we proceed with the design. So we want to try to do those concurrently to keep ourselves to sort of make sure what we're doing is pragmatic, and also to ensure that there's something usable or interactive that people can play with as it evolves. And the first code target we want is to create some kind of simulation of the sorts of attacks we're analyzing when we're doing this security analysis. So that's the gist of that status update. Any questions or comments? And we will be doing regular status updates moving forward. So I would also like to be in this update slot in future Arborist calls.
Sure thing.
Yep. Okay, that's
Any
it
other...
for that project.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions for Nate, and/or any other research and implementation updates? Let me just check the attendees. Don't see anybody on from Kedit or from Equilibrium. Okay, let's move on. So let's open it up for any open announcements before we move on to discussion. Deirdre, go ahead.
A quick update on Kedit and ZSAs from the most recent zip syncs with the Kedit team and ZSA stuff. There is a draft being worked on of V6 transactions that includes ZSA transfer, issuance, and burn. So very happy to see that from the Kedit team. Zip editors will be continuing to look at that and work on that with them. And we also got some updates from the Kedit team on how space in the updated circuits for transfer issuance as well. We got those on Tuesday. So that was good to see. We're trying to, use all the tricks and from working on Halo 2 and the Orchard circuit to keep it on chain as small as can be safely done. There was one more thing I was going to mention and I don't remember what it was. I'll quickly mention that the Kedit folks are looking to be developing as much as they can going forward, which is very cool. We're very excited to see that, but we also don't have all the bells and whistles that Zcash has, such as a fully integrated wallet. So we're in discussions with the Kedit team about what they're going to build and what the foundation team has been thinking about of our future roadmap for the full Zebra project and what it exists, may exist, things like that, so that they can continue to move forward with CSAs, but building it forward towards Zebra. Their proof of concept end-to-end chain recently has been built on Zcash, which makes sense because they have all the pieces in place. But now that Zcash is moving towards deprecation, we're happy to continue and start the discussions with the Kedit to get these things working in a Zebra-centric world. So that's starting. So that's a little bit of the ZSA stuff. And we start about making the issuance key structure and signing, so the issuance signing operations independent in terms of parameters and the primitives that we use from, or we've talked about this before, the whole ZSA sort of thing was designed to be working in the Orchard shielded pool, but it is theoretically workable on any shielded pool, including future shielded pools, not just Orchard. So that incentivizes the design of issuing shielded assets to be independent of the parameters of any of the shielded pools themselves, including Orchard. So we talked a bit about moving it away from the current Red Palace design to something else, and we kind of sketched out some Schnorr-based signatures, but we haven't nailed it down yet. But that was discussed on that Tuesday morning as well, and I think that's a good thing to move forward. We all agreed that that's a good idea moving forward. I don't think that's been written up yet, but that should show up on those transfer and burn and issuance. We'll just issuance zips sometime soon. So a little ZSA update.
I think you're muted, Dodger, but yes, I assume you're pointing at me. Just to follow up on that, because that was what I was raising my hand for. It's not precisely that, like, if we decided that Orchard and Red Palace made the most sense, that would still be what we go for, but there's no need to bind them together and require that it's that. And the current motivation, which is what I wanted to bring up specifically here, is that for HSMs in particular, we think that it might be easier for deployment for people doing issuance, like the people who are actually issuing assets, for the curve or signature scheme that is used there to be something that is more easily or more widely deployed. Now, couple of candidates that could go that way. If anyone on the call has specific constraints related to this, now would be an excellent time to hear about them. Either, like, doesn't have to be in this call, but on getting in touch with us on the Discord or the forums or somewhere about like if you are considering issuing assets in this way and have constraints on the way that you issue them. This is a good time to be giving that feedback. The current,
Yes.
as an alternative, the current candidate that we're considering is BIP 340, so Schnorr signatures with CP2 for 6K1. So it's another curve that we support, being a fork of Bitcoin. It's not a signature scheme that we currently use anywhere on Zcash, so it would be new from that perspective. But it's one that Bitcoin have moved to, and so there's potential share in terms of mind share with the rest of the ecosystem in terms of deployment potentially. But there's still work to be done to see if that hypothesis actually plays out in terms of ease of use, or whether it'd be better to go for a different scheme that is more easily deployed. So yeah, feedback, please.
100%. And if you want to leave feedback, we have the zips repo. That's github.com zcash/zips. We also have the community Discord. The zip editors and the Kedit folks are all participating on the community Discord. And we have a couple of channels in there where we're discussing these sort of items. So those are places where you can get in touch.
Cool. Any questions, comments on that particular topic? Okay. One thing I think is probably worth mentioning on this call is that there is a proposal to add some more zip editors to the team. Deirdre, your audio is dropping in and out a little bit, so I'll just ask Strad maybe to describe what the plan is there. Sorry to put you on the spot, Strad.
Well, the rough plan in part derives from some suggestions that Teo made. So there's a group of things there, but for the editors specifically, the thinking is that thus far it started off with basically just Dera Emma Hopwood, and then a couple of of ECC people helping out here and there, and then it transitioned into Dera Emma and Deirdre being the two primary zip editors, and with a slightly larger group of people helping out here and there. But the larger group of people was somewhat amorphously defined. And so the thinking here is that moving to more formally having a few extra people, means that we can start to load share a bit more in terms of how zips are edited and reviewed and processed to be more efficient in the way we get through things, and also share some of the decisional burden, and shard out the requirements there away from putting a lot of stress onto a couple of people.
Thanks, Strad.
Yeah, I can speak to some of the process changes apart from having more zip editors. So when you have more people making decisions, you have to think about a bit more about how you make those decisions. And so the most significant change that we want to write down, which we've effectively been doing anyway, is requiring a consensus of zip editors to make significant changes. So things like accepting a zip, rejecting a zip, things that look like that, like making changes to an accepted zip, major changes, that is. So that's one part of that. And we're going to say you need consensus for that. Similarly, for adding or removing zip editors, I think we decided on consensus minus one person. But all of those details will be in the zip in the zips repository when I get to writing them down. So one of the big changes is formalizing consensus decision making. The other one is having and as part of that, formalizing what a zip editor meeting is. So what it means to have what's called quorum. So enough people at the meeting for it to be official. At the moment, we're looking at one zip editor associated with the foundation and one zip editor associated with ECC, but we're happy to get feedback on that. and then just some admin stuff. So having somebody, the zip secretary, or whose job it is to post what's on the agenda a few days before the meeting, and then post a summary of what significant decisions were made at the meeting. So that's about it. Oh, and the other thing which the Sustainability Fund people have already experienced is we're going to split reviewing the content of zips from reviewing the style and typo and those kinds of things. So, because content review requires a lot of engineers, but style reviews, you can just get 1 or 2 people to do that and then bring them back for approval. So those are the kinds of changes we're looking at making to the zip editing process. A lot of them we've been doing informally for quite a while anyway.
Thanks, Tior. Nate?
Yeah, if I wanted to direct potential candidates as zip editors towards that, to join that, where should I send them?
Currently, we're having this conversation in the Zips channel. So what I will do is I will copy a link to that channel on the R&D ECC. And so, yeah, go to that channel and say, hey, I'd like to be a zip editor, and we'll chat about it at our next meeting when we review this draft of changes to the zip editors and the process.
Some of that will be also easier for people to consider once the process changes have been written up, so that people, because some of the process currently is, as with all process documents, the process is what actually is done. So part of the the outcome of the changes here will be that people considering becoming zip editors will have a better idea of what they achieve, what their responsibilities are as as part of that.
Any more questions, or anybody want to say anything else on that particular topic? Does anybody want to make any other announcements? Deirdre.
So I've told this to some people.
Oh no,
You've muted.
We've lost.
I think you tapped
Deirdre.
mute.
Deirdre, you're
Sorry. Better?
Yeah.
I'm leaving the Zcash Foundation. My last day will be September 13th, which is a Wednesday for me. So I will no longer be a zip editor, but I will be a zip editor until then.
Where's the thumbs down button?
I'm going to work on different cryptography than Zcash. But I'll be in the world. I'm not going to disappear into a hole somewhere, but I'll probably speak more about what I'm working on and where I'm going when I start it in a couple of weeks. But yeah, I'm going to be leaving the Zcash ecosystem, at least formally, as a formal employee. I just wanted to say that I grew up as a cryptographer because of Zcash, and a lot of you who are on this call and have been on these calls with me, it's bittersweet to kind of leave the nest, as it were.
Oh, we've lost you again for some reason.
Better?
Yeah,
No?
better.
Okay, these stupid earbuds. Anyway, I'm going to miss you all, and I'm going to miss the amazing things that we get to do with Zcash, but I'm going to be cheering everyone on and Zcash on into the future. So I will see you around.
You know, Deirdre, the fact that you're leaving the foundation doesn't mean that you have to stop being a zip editor.
It doesn't, but I don't think I'll have the bandwidth to juggle so many things at once. Technically, it does not. You are correct.
Zuko.
Also, why not mash up whatever new cryptography you're working on into Zcash somehow? Is that possible?
You never know. You never know.
I'm just happy that we are helping seed more people into the wider environment who care about cryptography and privacy.
Definitely.
Zico, did you want to say something?
I was just saying thank you so much for everything you've contributed, Deirdre.
Thank you, Zuko.
Yeah, I want to
Plus
echo
one.
that and say, yeah, it is definitely bittersweet. But you know, at the foundation, you know, we take the attitude that we want to help and support people in achieving their career goals, even if that path lies outside of the foundation. So, you know, Deirdre has played a huge role in Zcash since long before I joined the foundation, particularly with regards to Zebra and Frost, two big, huge projects that the foundation's been working on for several years. So yeah, thank you, Deirdre, and I do hope that we continue to see and hear lots of you
Yes.
within the Zcash community as you get settled in and get your feet under the table in your new role.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm still a co-author on Frost, so I will still be kind of flitting in and out of Frost-related threshold signature stuff. So I will at least still be around in that regard.
Okay. Any other announcements anybody wants to make?
Did anyone give the ECC status report when I was late?
Yeah, Chris gave it.
Okay, good. Excellent. Thanks, Chris.
And Nate gave an update on the proof of stake research, or the trading finality layer. I'm not sure what term to use actually. Okay, any other open announcements? If not, let's move on to, I think this is actually one of the first formal discussion topics we've had on the agenda for Arborist Calls, and this is something that we chatted about briefly during the last Arborist Call, and I wanted to put it formally on the agenda, and that's to talk about detection keys and out-of-band notes / liberated payments. And the reason that I think that these two topics are kind of related is because we obviously have faced a sort of a scalability challenge over the past year or so, where we have faced a situation where the need to scan the entire blockchain has placed undue burden onto wallets. And there's been a couple of suggestions in the past that detection keys might be a way of reducing the computational burden of doing that scanning. But also I wanted to throw in the mix the idea that transmitting note information out of band may also be a solution to this, and may also facilitate greater integration and deployment of Zcash within, for example, messaging platforms. And I know that there's been past work done on liberated payments, which I think also plays into the sort of sending ZEC using a messaging platform without necessarily knowing what the other person's Zcash address is. So I just wanted to raise this topic. I shall let Strad speak.
Well, I just thought for the benefit of everyone here, I'd just give a very brief summary of what these three things are. So currently for shielded transactions, the way that you learn that you have something is by scanning the chain with your viewing key. A detection key, the idea there is you instead can detect the presence of a transaction for you with a detection key, but that detection key does not have the capability to view what the transaction is. So it does reveal to whoever has it that this transaction belongs to you. It does reveal metadata, but it doesn't reveal like the received amount and memo field and so on. The rough idea being that in that model, you would give the detection key to a service who runs the detection for you with powerful servers, and maybe that's something you pay for, and then you they let you know what ones were for you, and you go from there. And there's a few things we can get into related to that. Out-of-band notes, the obvious thing, just when you make a transaction, give that transaction directly to the person who's receiving it, instead of, you still submit it to the chain, but instead of the recipient having to scan the whole chain to find that transaction, you give it directly to the recipient. For instance, if you're doing a payment via a QR code or something, that could set up a local transmission pathway to directly send the transaction. And then liberated payments, or I think the most recent term for it was URL encapsulated payments. Essentially, the idea there is to put pre-compute a series of temporary wallets which each have like some defined amount of funds, like 10 ZEC, 5 ZEC, whatever. And you have those like having cash in your wallet, where you have like your bank balance accessible by your card, and then you have a series of notes that you can give individually to people. So the idea being that you've essentially prematurely paid out of your main account into these temporary accounts, and then to pay someone, you can just give them the spending key for that account. So for a brief window of time, both the sender and recipient have the spending key to the same account. The transfer is effectively instantaneous because you just transfer the money there. However, it is also revocable for some period of time because the sender can use the spending key they still have to pull those funds back. So there's a sort of a trade-off there in UX between the payment is essentially like bearer-based, instantaneous. However, you then need to do, your wallet then needs to do a claiming process to actually claim what those funds are. But the advantage here is you don't need to know the address of the recipient to give them funds. You can just give them this URL, the idea of being encapsulated in a URL. You can just give them this link that will then, when they click it, if they don't have a Zcash wallet, it will say, hey, go to here and download the Zcash wallet to claim these funds. Or if you have one, it could claim them automatically. Cool. So I think that's a brief summary of the three.
One thing I wanted to point out about the sort of claimable element of liberated payments is that it has a potential use case in a situation where you send the note information out of band, but the person at the far end either doesn't receive it or it gets lost or something along those lines. Without the ability to claim back the funds, those coins will be lost. Yep. So having the situation where you can send funds to somebody, send them the information out of band that they need to then claim those funds, but still be able to claim them back if needs be, could be potentially important from a UX perspective. I've got Deirdre first, and then Nate.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask some clarifying questions. I think around detection keys, we need to add more key material to your Zcash address or your unified address. This enables you to optionally, when the sender opts in and you provide them with this extra key material in your Zcash unified address, to use that to make the
I think we've lost Deirdre. Jack, Strad, do you want to address that particular question?
Well, to answer the question for everyone else on the call, yes, it does require additional key material, and the unified address packet format, like the format it uses, is the sort of thing that would enable us to deploy that to users. If we wanted it to be uniform in that everyone used it, it would require essentially a network upgrade to require it, and it would require users to all migrate to wallets that support that functionality. There are also a couple of different ways that this could potentially be done. Like we've tried detection key things in the past, and many of the ideas at the time had various degrees of issues. The two most promising things I'm aware of at the moment are this idea of fuzzy detection keys, which give some level of like over detection, where the side doing the detection doesn't necessarily learn precisely what ones were interested to you. They learn a superset, but there's values that need to be tuned there. And again, it doesn't prevent data leakage. It slightly reduces. There's stuff we'd have to consider there. The other one is the idea of private message retrieval based schemes, private information retrieval based schemes, of which I'm aware of a couple that people have been playing with. I know one of them exists because we were asked to make the unified address format large enough to support it, which is why we can support like up to 64 kilobyte receiver types, because those ones were rather chonky. But that sort of one would leak less information to the server, but might require more processing power. There's stuff that needs to be figured out there. I don't know if you called it Deirdre, but I was just saying at the beginning, yes, it would need more key material, but it would be like opt-in to begin with, yes, but it could be something that we force the network to upgrade to if we decided that made the best sense for users. Yeah.
For another question.
Just FYI, Deirdre, your audio is dodgy again. Nate.
Okay.
Yeah, so one way I think about these is that each approach is likely to have sort of different usability impacts or trade-offs. And so one place my mind goes to is, the first thing is, so can we maybe start from the usability? So for example, the liberated payments usability might be fairly distinct from the current protocol and the current thing wallets do. The other place my mind goes to is, well, can we do them all? Because if some are better for some use cases or others, maybe that's something we could consider. And when I think about that, it becomes really valuable in my mind if we can do any of these without protocol changes. And so I'm not too sure about the details there, but I'm hopeful that there might be a lot we can do without protocol changes. For example, maybe liberated payments is a good candidate for something we could do without protocol changes. And those are always appealing to me because that might mean, okay, we have current shielded wallets that operate currently in a particular way. Some users use them, they meet their needs to some degree. Oh, but hey, we could add new wallets or new features of existing wallets that support this new use case or user flow. And then we can see, is that useful for different populations of users? And we can sort of, try multiple things, try to find product market fit with different kinds of usability and trade-offs. But that all being said, that's more work. I'm just interested in keeping the door open to more experimentation with less need to coordinate on protocol changes.
Deirdre.
Kind of related to what Nate was just discussing. Is there a compare contrast to the fast sync, DAG sync changes that are getting deployed for the ECC's wallet, but also for, I think, the wallet SDK, plus something like incoming viewing keys, not necessarily full viewing keys? I think that would be on the full node side, but with fast, or not even together, but with the full fast sync coming with the wallets. Was that fast enough to mitigate the costs of doing fast sync over light wallet D and doing full scanning all shielded transactions with your full viewing key on your controlled wallet on your device, not even trusting a full consensus node. Asking for numbers is a bit much, but is there like a vibe of how much margin between lovely operating fast sync where you and your full light wallet can just scan it and get everything you need to go with everything in your control, versus something like deploying detection keys, or versus something like scanning with a consensus node that you trust with like an incoming viewing key, for example.
I don't know of any of numeric comparisons. Someone posted in the chat, Taylor Hornby did a nice lexicographical comparison, just wrote a blog post about it, comparing from privacy perspectives. As far as performance goes, a couple of notes first. Even with DagSync, that doesn't help you find transactions that you've never seen before.
Right.
If your wallet has observed things, or you have some connection other than you gave out your address, DagSync will help. It's also, as another reminder, we are not fully deploying DagSync in this SDK release. We're deploying large parts of the internals of what would go into it, but it does not have the full scaling functionality that we want, because that will require significantly more engineering. But as far as as like my feeling on numbers go, if you pair something like DagSync with when your wallet is doing in-person transactions, the transaction is sent directly from your device to your peer's device, then that will basically cover almost every user.
So
will
Strad,
not need to scan the main chain.
With respect to that question, isn't the primary difference between the light wallet sync of potentially, full transactions and compact transactions just the bandwidth cost? Because I don't think that the trial decryption should be altered essentially at all.
Between full sync and compact sync, you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that is, and improving versus what? Are you saying DagSync versus DagSync versus current sync, or what are you asking?
I understood Deirdre's question to be related to, essentially to be, is the fast spendability, or are the fast spendability changes and or DagSync, do they provide enough benefit to potentially offset the costs related to relative to the linear scan? And I think that my answer to that would be that if scanning is not bounded by bandwidth, then there's actually no difference whatsoever. It's that compact scanning was originally designed in the context of, we want users around the world who may pay per byte on their mobile plans to have an option for downloading transactions that doesn't break the chain or break their bank. But I think even today, implementing a client that downloads full transaction or full blocks instead of compact blocks, that's actually a pretty tractable difference, probably for users in like developed nations where their bandwidth is not a consideration.
I thought the question though was comparing that to detection strategies or PIR. Is that what you were?
Deirdre, do you want to clarify what the question was?
Yeah, so I was mostly asking, can we get away with improvements in things like DagSync that would, in theory, make it at least faster to not make consensus level changes, to not change the addresses very much, to require up to, not have to do detection key changes or other on-chain changes. Is that fast enough? What we can
Yeah,
define
so
what enough is, and does it buy us compute savings to make that marginally worthwhile versus things that require us to make consensus changes,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah, and that was what I was getting at, which is what DagSync is leveraging is private knowledge of the wallet graph. Any detection approach is not going to have access to that information. So, because it's on some level discovering that information. So,
Yeah.
to the extent that what DagSync does, it's going to be significantly better than any of those other schemes. The thing that it doesn't do is detection of things you've never seen before that have previously no connection to you. That is the area where I think that the cumulative cost of, like, for an individual user versus the server doing the detecting whatever, the server's compute costs are likely to be much larger than the individual users are, because of the fact that you can't aggregate these detection keys. They fuzzy message keys, maybe there's a bit that you can do there, but what you do gain from those detection systems is the economies of scale. So informally, I would expect that someone trying to scan the same number of outputs, even if they are trying to do so for 100x more users, because those users' alternative is scanning on their phone, I would pick that overall the detection key scanning would probably end up faster / more cost effective, even with that detriment in place, simply because you can just throw very powerful servers at it for short periods of time. But like I said, if you can get around that by using peer-to-peer approaches, then you basically obviate the need to do that. And that is entirely out of band outside consensus.
I think it's a good question. I have some intuitions, but we'll find out more from deployment soon. But it can't open up the trade-off curve with regard to scalability, because without detection keys, or even better, liberated payments, then you still have to do then each client still has to do something on each ciphertext in order to detect new incoming payments to that client. And that means if enough other people are also posting ciphertext, then that's going to swamp your client. And maybe detection keys, but definitely liberated payments could open up that side.
Yeah, there is no silver bullet. I want to read out what Nate posted to the chat. He said, I have one opinion. Due to practical needs, the current Light Wallet scanning approach compromises on privacy for bandwidth. Doing so enables Light Wallet D to associate a transaction ID with a client IP, which is close to the metadata leaked by detection keys. So I believe they have roughly similar privacy, whereas detection keys may be significantly better in bandwidth and balance update alacrity for users. But my high-level approximation may be overlooking important nuances. There's one aspect of detection keys that I think is important to recognize, and that's that the detection can happen either on the user's device. So the Light Wallet D version 2 server could send the detection key field of every transaction to the user's device for the trial decryption to happen on the user's device, or the detection could happen on the server side. Now, if it happens on the server side, there's obviously a cost implication to that, depending on the scale of the user base that the server serves. But Paul Pui from Edge has suggested that that's not actually a big deal. Apparently, they're doing it with Monero, and it doesn't cost them a huge amount, or rather, the amount that it costs is outweighed by the benefits of having more users for their wallet. The other sort of aspect that I think is probably worth bearing in mind is that if you are doing your detection on the server side, then the server can constantly monitor new blocks, and it can notify you as soon as it sees a new transaction for you, which is a very different model from the current user experience of having to start up your wallet, wait for it to download, and then scan through all of those blocks or whatever. So you can receive a notification from the server side, which is doing live monitoring of the blockchain when it sees a transaction. And that's something, by the way, for those ZF engineers who are listening, that I plan to introduce as an idea with regards to Zebra and viewing keys as and when we get around to doing that functionality. I'm gonna stop there. Strad, do you wanna say what you posted in?
Oh yeah, I just noted in the chat that as long as we still support the recipient writes their address on a billboard use case, i.e. the donation QR code model, then we fundamentally have to handle the scan the entire chain to find all our transactions workflow. And that scanning has to happen somewhere. So either on each client individually, which gives you the nice broad scale, broadband privacy, ideally. In practice, not that because of the Lightwire D issues. So if you can move UX away from that in general to more of a user in mediated interactions is what leads to transactions, then that you already essentially have a channel open between the user, the user and the merchant, or the user and the person they're sending funds to. If you have that channel open already via some trusted pathway, then leveraging that immediately to do the transaction detection enables you to use the much faster techniques and get away from that scanning process. But if we want to retain the address billboard, so that's another way to potentially solve this problem, is to move the UX away from patterns that need to support broad scale scanning, which also has the benefit for the long scale future of, if we decide as a community to move away from having everything be recoverable from the chain, for instance, which is something that won't scale infinitely, so is something that chains will have to deal with. And as we've seen from the last year, where the blockchain ballooned 10x in size, is something that is going to have to be dealt with.
Zuko.
But Strad, what if the QR code on the billboard contains routing information for getting a message to that recipient? Then that recipient does not need to scan the blockchain.
That is precisely what I said to the last person who asked me about this. It was like, I have a donation case. You can't kill that. And I go, I would love to just stick a Tor hidden service in there, or a NIM mailbox or something. But again, that is about moving that UX to that pattern. Currently, the UX for doing that is just post your Zcash address, which is
wait,
insufficient for this.
Okay, but what you said is wrong if you can include routing information in your QR code.
What I said was recipient writes their address on a billboard.
So if the word address in that sentence excludes routing information, that's true.
Yes.
But if you include routing information in the QR code, that doesn't change the UX. You still post your thing on a billboard, and people then send you money, and you then get the money without scanning the blockchain.
It does potentially change the UX because you need the routing information to be stable enough to be able to be posted on a billboard, which certain things can enable, but that does constrain the kind of technology you use for that. Whereas having, there's more that would need to be built into that to make that kind of thing work, as opposed to currently where the routing information is just the cryptographic address you receive payments at, which is able to be far more stable.
Okay, so a way to say it is that use case requires either scanning the blockchain or having sufficiently stable routing.
Yeah.
Touching on UX, I just want to read out something that Andrew Arnott posted in the chat. He said, detection keys sound like a huge UX win, but messaging will be super critical, emphasizing that this is opt-in, for example, so that news doesn't say that Zcash is sacrificing privacy. And he also pointed out that these notes, the idea of liberated payments, where you can literally hand funds to others, could also help with offline scenarios. For example, if he wants to pay his cousin for food at a reunion in the mountains where they don't have internet. I think it's you know, there's some interesting use cases, ideas, and scenarios that get thrown up by this, which, you know, in one respect, you know, what Strad said is right. If you know, if someone puts their, as it currently defines, Zcash address up on a billboard, then we need to support that use case of scanning the entire blockchain. But we start trying to think about things in a different way, like, for example, cash, and also potentially if we start looking far ahead to a world where we potentially roll out some kind of scalability solution that involves some kind of roll up, then this needs to be able to transmit note information out of band of the actual blockchain, I think becomes more urgent and more attractive. The idea of being able to roll up the entire Zcash blockchain into a tiny you know, state representation could be potentially hugely interesting. I know that other blockchains are exploring doing that, but yeah, I'll stop talking. I guess I'll add the phrase that springs to mind, which is that it's a paradigm shift, I think, for cryptocurrency, to say, right, instead of using the blockchain as both a messaging layer for transmitting information about how to claim the funds that have been sent to you, and a ledger which prevents double spending, you separate them out and use a separate messaging layer where you don't have to store those messages on the blockchain forever. But the ledger remains, the really important part that prevents the double spending remains on the blockchain.
Yeah, and then some part of that then becomes like, yeah, what is the functionality that matters in terms of people using Zcash? Because the other way to look at this is, you know, another use case, which it gets a little bit further out, is the, you know, a related use case that we've had similar discussions before about is, I send funds to like, I make a shielded a spending key, I send funds to its address, and then I stick that key in a vault for 10 years. Should I still be able to use those funds afterwards? And this has sort of a similar element of how long should data on the chain be, like, because that one there doesn't actually require on-chain storage. They could store the note information in that same vault. So that's a sort of a separate issue of how long should funds in a pool be usable in the form that they are. But it is similar to the on-chain storage thing from the perspective of, what are the costs to the chain of maintaining state long term? And what are the costs in terms of usability and privacy and ability to service different facets of users of having that state there or of not having that state there? So it's lots of fun stuff to think about here in terms of what which users we choosing to support and which users we are choosing not to support within the scaling model that we want. Because it will be the case that there are just some use cases that are completely incompatible with scalable privacy.
one of the reasons that this whole topic of out of band notes and the messaging links to it has popped up is because with regards to the deployment of Frost, there is a requirement to facilitate or enable communications between the participants in a Frost circle for carrying out operations like signing and whatnot. And that implicitly, potentially one solution there is to have some sort of a messaging solution, like, it could be done over Signal, could be done on a blockchain for coordinating those types of operations. But obviously having a messaging layer that facilitates those sorts of operations, and that can be easily integrated into wallets, opens up the question, well, what else could we use that for? If you have someone's address to send them information out of band of the blockchain, then it opens up that possibility of being able to do out of band notes. But I should make it clear that we're at a very, very early stage of exploring that whole solutioning. So don't assume that me mentioning it here means that anything's going to happen very quickly or anytime soon, or even in a form that matches what I've just described. I do feel like the conversation is petering out, so I'm going to give people one last opportunity to say anything or ask questions or anything else on this particular topic. But I will plan to raise it again in the future, so that people have an opportunity to think about it some more and mull over it a bit. Strat.
I did want to note that while detection keys are a trickier thing to set up and play with, technically it is possible to like shoehorn them in outside of consensus if someone really wanted to play with them, by just overwriting memo field space of dummy notes to sort of like stick tags into your transactions, so in semi-undetectable ways. So there are things that people can do to play with this, like without just to get some experience with the UX. Out of band notes is completely in the hands of wallet devs, because it is literally just a wallet to wallet interaction pattern. So it would be very interesting to see people like try out different ways of building those interactions, hopefully in a privacy preserving manner. And if you have questions about that, hop in the Discord, in the Zcash R&D Discord, and ask about it there. And then liberated payments, I don't remember if we had any demo stuff implemented from that. We had some designs that were pretty far along. But if someone was interested in, like, again, putting together some like initial demos or tests of that kind of thing, again, come and have a chat to us in the Zcash R&D Discord, and we can point you in a direction if you're excited about playing around with these, because none of these things are going to happen without someone picking up the baton and running with it. But all of these, detection keys a bit less so, because a lot of cryptographic complexity there, but all of these essentially are amenable to someone just coming along and saying, I am invested in trying to make this a reality, and having a go.
Yeah, and we have a minor grants program, which would be perfect for someone to do a bit of experimenting and a bit of prototyping and play around with it a little bit. And I'm pretty sure that there are wallet devs out there who would be interested in facilitating, collaborating on that sort of thing. So if you are listening to this conversation, whether live or afterwards, within the next, I think, 11 days, then and you're interested in potentially putting finger to keyboard to try and build something along these lines, then please go to zfnd.org/minor grants. Learn about the minor grants program, which is ideal for funding either an individual or a small team to build something along these lines.
That's MINOR grants.
Yes, yes. Last time I had the benefit of having the text on the screen, but MINOR grants. Yeah, we don't give grants to minors. Right.
Are minors eligible? I know some minors who might want to apply. Wait, I'm under 18. Did you mean people who dig ore out of the ground?
I mean, people who dig ore out of the ground, people like
Okay.
BHP Billiton, and people who with big trucks and huge
But
diggers.
just to clarify, if anybody who's under 18 is interested, should I tell them to apply?
I think so. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay. Are there any other topics that people want to discuss? We've got, I think we've got 17 minutes left on the scheduled calendar entry, but I appreciate that people might be a little bit talked out and may have a lot that they want to take away and think about. So if you want to raise any other topics, please do so now by raising your hand. Going once, going twice, going 3 times. We will see you again in a couple of weeks at the next Arborist call, which will be in the earlier time slot of 3 p.m. UTC. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Deirdre, farewell. This, I guess, is your final Arborist call, at least as a Zcash Foundation employee. Like I said, don't think you're going to escape Zcash that easily. And thank you again for all your contributions and work, and the key role that you played in getting Zebra to being a functional production quality node implementation for the Zcash ecosystem.
Godspeed, Zcash and Zebra and everything else. I'll see you around.
Right, thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
See you again in a
everyone.
couple of
Bye.
weeks.